Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. And in this week's look at how the Brexit media is spinning things, it's back to the old favourite, the Daily Express, as we go from the misleading last week to the ridiculous this. I'm going to take a look at how they reported what should have been a win in the interests of European unity as capitulation, and how they think Marine Le Pen winning the French presidency will somehow improve our post-Brexit future. All in the context of wondering why the narrative in the Daily Express seems to be aligning exactly with Putin's aims in Europe. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So you may have noticed that Boris Johnson's government like to distract us with dead cats from time to time. Many of the things they've done that people call dead cats are not. They're actually just terrible things that they are doing. But sometimes they do terrible things not because they think they gained from it, but to distract us from the gainful terrible things they do. Those are the dead cats. This week, we've seen another. To distract from the fact that your government is now officially led by criminals who've even accepted the findings that determine their guilt as criminals. That criminal government have started banging on about asylum seekers as well. I'm going to discuss that in the next video today. Calling them illegal immigrants when this is factually untrue. They've pushed their plans to illegally deport asylum seekers 4,500 miles away to Rwanda for what they call processing. This isn't a move that helps the Conservatives. It isn't a move that helps the UK. It is a statistical fact that our economy and society experiences net gain from migrants. So spending a lot of money during a financial crisis and a chronic labour shortage to actually ship workers illegally out of the country can only serve the interests of a government who need a distraction. Well, we had another early on in our post-Brexit reality as well. The government and the Channel Islands failed to adhere to the terms of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement that we signed with the EU in denying fishing licences to French fishing vessels. They were very careful to come up with excuses that would mean excluding only French fishing vessels in order to stoke up one of the gutter press's favourite topics of discussion, war with France. We were supposed to believe it was a coincidence that it was only French fishing vessels hit by this. No. It was another distraction that could be poked whenever things were getting a bit sticky and the Express and the Mail and maybe the Sun needed something to put on their front page that wasn't government failure. Now that the distraction is wearing a bit thin, and in the face of Macron's threats to make border checks tighter, the UK government decided to sort the issue out, and the licence have now almost all been granted. They came up with excuses, of course, to justify withholding the licences, but the bottom line is that whenever Macron reminded Johnson that despite the likes of what the Express and the Mail say, France is actually being quite reasonable with border checks, they don't have to be. In fact, they could check every single truck that passes through. And they just might if his fishermen weren't getting their dues. Every time he did that, lo and behold, a load more licences were issued. Bit of a coincidence, wasn't it? But now the issue is essentially sorted according to reports. The EU Commission seems happy, the French government seems happy, the Daily Express seem very angry. What is Boris playing at? Its headline rages. Britain's furious as PM hands major win to France in fishing round. Now, first of all, when a serious newspaper talks about the feeling of the general public, they will base it on a poll. It may or may not be a good poll. It may or may not be a valid analysis of that poll. And more often than not, it is not. But it is at least based on something. The Daily Express does things differently. They cite their readers. So the people who read the Express propaganda then post comments on their website, and then the Express cherry pick the comments that basically parroted what they told them to say, and they use it to suggest that Britons are angry at this. The fact of the matter is that Britons don't even know about it. If I were to try and ask someone in the street, in any town or city in the land, ask them to tell me about the French fishing round, what they think about it, I think I would have to travel far and wide before I met any reaction other than a furrowed brow and a "what the bloody hell are you talking about" response. But this news should be hailed as a win. It was one of many barriers that Johnson placed in the way of normal bilateral relationships with our European neighbours and allies. Until we normalise relations with the EU and its members, we will never make serious progress on our post-Brexit future. But the Express is presenting it as a failure, a capitulation. And they're blaming Boris Johnson directly. Now, you have to ask yourself why. Bear a few things in mind. So, first of all, the Daily Express supports Boris Johnson. They have done so even when other far-right tabloids were attacking him. So they're not using this to put pressure on him to resign. Like if you see something in the Times, you might think, well, they were never really a fan of Boris Johnson. The Daily Express has consistently been a fan of Boris Johnson. They don't want him to resign because then we might get someone less insane in charge. I won't put it better than that. Second, the Daily Express didn't have to report on this story at all if they didn't want to. It's not unusual for them when there's a tricky story to just ignore it completely. It's not a big issue for the public. You can understand them reporting on something they'd rather not if it's a big issue in public because they have to then try and con the public into their way of thinking. The public don't even know about it. They'd never had to know about it. Hardly any bugger knows about it, and of those who do, you won't really find many a post. Even British fishermen wanted it sorting out amicably for fear of difficulties in them being able to sell their fish in France if it wasn't resolved. You know, denying the French fishermen their licences helped nobody on either side. It was purely a useful distraction for a while that has now worn thin. The only conclusion that may be drawn is that those behind the Express want a fractious relationship between Britain and the EU. The fact that this issue is one that affected France specifically might even mean they want a particular wedge between Britain and France. Now, consider this in the context of the wider European picture. A close advisor to Putin for many years wrote a book with a chapter on splitting off the UK politically from the rest of Europe. We know that Kremlin funding and bots, as well as closely linked individuals, were actively supporting Leave during the 2016 Brexit referendum. Putin wanted Brexit because it achieved that goal of splitting the UK and other European powers politically. The botched full-scale invasion of Ukraine has pushed for greater European unity. Even famously neutral countries are very clear which side they're on here. It's too obvious. Sweden has all but said it's joining NATO this summer. Finland doesn't seem to be far behind. This background is creating pressure for the UK to show greater unity with Europe as well. So why would the Express be angry at a Prime Minister whom they support, smoothing over a row that never needed to happen, that's fulfilled its political purpose, when continuing it would only maintain that distance between Britain and France and potentially the wider EU? It's because they want Britain to be divided from the EU, and maybe France specifically, even if this comes at a cost to UK trade, job opportunities, living standards, international credibility. They want that fractured relationship. Their aims are exactly aligned with those of Vladimir Putin, aren't they? Then we come on to their story about another Putin supporter, Marine Le Pen. They report the prospect of her winning the presidency as a good thing. Now, at first you may think, well, you know, if you were a Brexit supporter, that might make sense. An anti-EU president would be a useful ally to post-Brexit Britain. But it wouldn't. Brexit, or Frexit in that case, is the mindset of the insular and the selfish. It doesn't have allies. It is the ideology of the self. For example, what benefits did the Brexit supporting Tories ever get from the orange one as president other than verbal support? Yeah, he spoke in support of Brexit. But what did they get? What did we gain? Nothing. What would we have gained if he'd have remained president? Nothing again. The trade deal, two things about that. First, have you read Trump's proposal? It would be horrendous for Britain. It was all about maximising American entry into the British market without conceding any market access themselves. Second, we wouldn't have had it anyway because Congress would block it due to the way we're behaving with the Northern Ireland Protocol. Until that issue was settled, nothing could be signed. So even with the orange one still in the White House now, we'd be getting nowhere with that American trade deal. We got nothing from a Putin and Brexit supporter in the White House. We'd have never got anything. Same would apply with Le Pen as president. I saw some bonehead suggesting, yeah, but she'd sort out the asylum seeker issue, wouldn't she? You know, as if she would stop them passing from northern France to Britain. It's like, she's a raging anti-foreigner, mate. She don't want them in France. What she'd actually do is give them all decent boats and send them all our way within a week. The idea of Le Pen as president is a nightmare. She'd be like Orban, only the head of a much more powerful EU nation. It'd be the best news Putin had in ages, I suspect. Thankfully, it looks unlikely, but as I was trying to explain to someone, after the unlikely result of the 2016 Brexit referendum and the unlikely result of the Trump presidency that followed, I'm not minded to breathe sighs of relief until the result is certain. But a Le Pen France would be like a Trump presidency. It would not be helpful to post-Brexit Britain. It would be helpful only to Putin's Russia. Yes, she would say nice things about Brexit. Oh yeah, you've totally made the right decision, while she screws us over. You know, she'll make Brexit even harder for us because she's just like the Tory Brexiteers. Selfish. But selfish people don't get on with each other because they're selfish. You know, their interests aren't aligned. They're never aligned because they're focused on themselves and each one is different. But it is worth considering why certain media outlets rejoice in conflict between allies of liberal democracies and rage when they come to agreements, especially against a background of a Putin government that wishes to divide these liberal democracies. You need to consider just how much of their common interest is coincidence and how much might be coordinated. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.